Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into, well, a really fascinating corner of India's innovation scene. It's incredibly dynamic. We've got our source material here, and it paints this picture of just huge activity. Think over 175,000 recognized startups, and then a massive 63 million MSMEs. These aren't just numbers, right? These are like the engines really driving India's growth and, its big leap in technology. But our sources show they face a really significant hurdle, maybe even crippling for some. It's about protecting and actually using their intellectual property effectively.
And that's the core problem we're digging into with this material, isn't it? The sources point towards a potential solution, something called patent trusts. Now, if you haven't heard of them, basically think of them as collaborative structures, legal entities where different companies or individuals even can pool their patents, their IP, and manage it together. So our mission in this deep dive using the material you shared is really to unpack how these trusts work. What are the specific challenges? And crucially, how can Indian startups and MSMEs actually use them strategically? Can they really, pave the way for competitive edge and faster growth?
Exactly. We'll look at the current scene, get into the specific IP problems innovators are facing in India, define what these patent trusts really are, look at the actual benefits, but also acknowledge the challenges, the real world hurdles. And then, yeah, wrap up with some examples and the opportunities our sources see specifically for India.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start with the sheer scale of this ecosystem our sources describe. India is, wow, the third largest startup hub globally now. We're seeing innovation everywhere: tech, health, agriculture, education, you name it. And it's not just happening on its own. The government's actively involved, right, with things like Startup India, the Talent Innovation Mission, providing support, incentives, really fueling this fire. And then you've got the foundation, the MSME sector, over 63 million. These aren't small fish. They contribute, what, around 30% to GDP?
Around 30%, yeah, and almost half of exports, something like 45%. They are truly the backbone of the economy, no
Yeah,
question.
almost half the exports. Wow, okay. It's a really vibrant picture. But when you look closer at the IP side of things within this picture, the sources show a pretty stark contrast. Awareness is growing. One source mentioned patent filings by startups and MSMEs jumped like 310% in 5 years, which is impressive. But overall adoption, and especially the strategic use of IP, it's still lagging behind the sheer amount of innovation that's happening.
Yeah.
And the material you shared details some really specific barriers. They're quite daunting, honestly. First off, cost. Just filing one patent in India that could be anywhere from, say, 45,000 up to 95,000 rupees. That includes legal fees, government fees, everything.
95,000 rupees. That's a huge sum for a small startup, running lean, or an MSME putting every bit back into the business.
Yeah.
Potentially prohibitive.
Exactly. And then there's the time delay. This is where it gets really tough, especially in tech. On average, getting a patent actually granted in India takes around 51 months.
51 months.
Yeah, over 4 years.
In the startup world, that's practically an eternity, isn't it?
Right.
Your tech might be outdated, or a competitor could have already launched something similar before your protection is even official.
And the third big thing identified is simply IP literacy. A lot of founders are brilliant innovators, but maybe not IP strategists. They might not fully grasp the strategic value their IP holds beyond just, getting that first filing done, how to license it, use it defensively, how it adds value for investors.
Yeah, that 4-year statistic, that really jumps out. And combined with those costs, you can see how these challenges really could hold back growth, competitiveness. You might have amazing tech, but if you can't afford to protect it fast enough or you don't know how to use that protection, you're just vulnerable. Makes total sense that our sources flag this. And this, like you said, is exactly where patent trusts come in as a potential game changer.
Precisely. So let's get into what a patent trust actually is, according to the material. At its core, it's a legal thing, an entity set up specifically to hold and manage patents. But it doesn't hold them for itself. It holds and manages them for its members, the beneficiaries. Think of it like a collective IP vault. And the sources outline different types, different flavors, depending on the goal. You've got defensive trusts. Their main job is to shield members from lawsuits, often by buying up patents that could be used against them. Then there are offensive trusts. These are more about making money. They actively try to generate revenue from the pooled IP, usually by licensing it out to others. You also see patent pools. These are common in industries like telecom, where everyone needs access to certain essential technologies to make things work together. They sort of cross-license within the pool. And finally, public interest trusts. Think healthcare. Their focus is getting important tech, like medicines, out to more people, especially in underserved areas. The sources also touch on how you actually set these up legally in India. You can use the Indian Trusts Act, 1882, either public or private trusts. Or, interestingly, they can be Section 8 companies under the Companies Act, 2013, basically not-for-profits. So there's some flexibility there, depending on what the trust wants to achieve.
And governance sounds crucial, right? Our sources really stress that the trustees' managers have fiduciary duties, meaning they have to act in the members' best interest, not their own. Transparency is key too. Audits, reporting are mentioned. And decisions usually get made together, like through a steering committee or a board with people from the member companies. Sounds like careful structure is vital. Okay, so here's where it gets really practical. How do these trusts actually help those startups and MSMEs beat the challenges we talked about? The cost, the time, the risk. First, cost. Remember that potential 95,000 rupees for one patent? By pooling resources in the trust, the cost per member for filing, for prosecution, you know, dealing with the patent office, and even for defending patents, it drops dramatically. It's basically collective buying power for IP services. Our sources mentioned shared lawyer fees as a direct saving. Makes IP affordable.
Absolutely. And it's not just saving money. Trusts open up ways to make money, too. Enhanced monetization. Think about a small MSME. They might have a patent for something cool, but it's not their main product, so it just sits there. A trust can take that patent, maybe bundle it with others, and license the package out. That creates revenue the little guy might never see alone. And through joint deals managed by the trust, even smaller firms can potentially reach global markets. It's about scale. Another huge plus is access to shared innovation. It's like having a private tech library just for members. Through cross-licensing deals inside the trust, members can use each other's patented tech. This speeds up their own R&D, right? Helps them innovate faster, stops them wasting money reinventing stuff someone else in the group already figured out.
And the legal risk reduction, that sounds massive, especially with patent trolls, or NPEs as they're called, getting hit with an infringement lawsuit. For a small startup, that could be game over. But a trust acts like a shield. Owning a big portfolio collectively, having coordinated defense plans, it makes the trust and its members way less attractive targets for NPEs or aggressive competitors.
Strength in numbers, basically.
Exactly. And the last point is credibility. Just being part of a well-run patent trust sends a signal. It says you're mature, you're thinking strategically about IP. That looks good to investors, helps with funding. It strengthens your market position. What's really interesting is how joining this collective thing actually boosts individual strength and reputation. It's not diluting, it's amplifying. Now, the sources are pretty clear. It's not all, smooth sailing. Setting up and running these trusts does come with hurdles. One big one is governance complexity. You've got potentially lots of members, tiny startups, slightly bigger MSMEs, all with different interests. Managing that fairly, that can be tricky.
Yeah, keeping everyone happy. I can see that. Right. Then there's regulatory compliance. They have to be careful not to fall foul of anti-competition laws like India's Competition Act. You can't use a trust to illegally block competitors or fix prices, that sort of thing. Valuation and revenue sharing. That's another really tough one. How do you put a fair value on the different patents people bring in? And then when money does come in from licensing, how do you split it fairly among members who contributed different things? It's complex.
Yeah, that sounds like a potential minefield.
It needs careful handling. And finally, just the admin overhead. Setting up the legal entity, drafting all the agreements, managing it day to day. It takes expertise, legal, financial, and it costs money upfront to get started.
Sure.
But the material also points to solutions, mitigation strategies, for governance. Clear rules, formal bylaws, maybe third-party arbitration for disputes. For compliance, transparency is key, and making sure joining the trust is voluntary. For valuation and revenue, use independent experts, agree on clear formulas right at the beginning. And for the admin costs, maybe government grants or incubator support could help ease that initial burden. The sources suggest things like that.
Okay, so the hurdles are real, but sound manageable with, careful planning, solid legal groundwork, and real transparency among the members. That seems absolutely key. Let's look at some real-world examples the sources mentioned. How do these things actually work out there?
Well, a really big one with strong Indian connections is the Medicines Patent Pool, or MPP. It's a public interest trust set up by Unitaid. Its whole aim is to get life-saving medicines to developing countries faster and cheaper. They license patents from big pharma, then sub-license them to generic makers. And major Indian companies like Cipla and Hetero have been huge partners, making affordable versions of critical drugs thanks to the MPP. It really shows IP pooling for social impact.
That's a fantastic example.
Another interesting one is Allied Security Trust, AST in the U.S. This is more of a classic defensive trust. Members basically chip in money to proactively buy patents that look like they might be used aggressively against them, especially by NPEs. By owning those patents together, they kind of neutralize the threat before it even turns into a lawsuit. It's preemptive defense.
Got it. Those examples really clarify the concepts. So if we take these models and think about India specifically, what are the opportunities? The sources highlight some exciting possibilities in key growth areas, like a clean tech trust, maybe tied into the National Green Hydrogen Mission, pooling IP in hydrogen, solar, batteries, EV tech. That could really help standardize things and speed up innovation in that whole green energy space, right?
Absolutely. And similarly, a digital health trust linked to the Ayushman Bharat digital mission.
Hmm.
Pooling health tech patents there could be vital for getting systems to talk to each other. Standardizing the tech across India's digital health setup, that could accelerate adoption hugely.
And what about for those millions of MSMEs, especially in rural areas?
Yeah, the sources suggest an agri-tech trust. Imagine pooling patents for things like agribiotech, low-cost farm sensors, drone tech for agriculture. That could really empower smaller rural innovators, give them access to tech they couldn't develop alone, and help scale up solutions.
And the sources mention academic institutions like the IITs and NITs could play a big role.
Definitely. They could be founding members, contributing valuable research IP right at the start. It helps bridge that gap between lab research and the market. The material even sketches out a kind of roadmap. Do an IP audit first, check feasibility, set up the legal side, draft the rules, bring members on board. And it also mentions policy ideas, government guidelines, maybe some grants or tax breaks, training programs to help get these trusts off the ground.
Okay, that paints a pretty comprehensive picture.
So if we boil it down, the core idea from the material is that patent trusts are being presented as this potentially transformative tool, a way for Indian startups and MSMEs to really overcome those big IP hurdles we talked about and scale up.
Right, by pooling resources, cutting down individual risks, opening up new markets, new revenue streams through working together, it seems like a really strategic path forward for them. And understanding this gives you, the listener, insight into a powerful collaborative strategy being actively explored in a major innovation hub like India. It's not just theory.
Exactly. And zooming out, these trusts aren't just legal structures, are they? They're about building collective strength, creating shared infrastructure for innovation. They could genuinely accelerate tech development and deployment, especially in critical areas like clean energy or digital health for a whole sector, maybe even the whole country.
So thinking about the benefits and the ways to handle the challenges, could patent trusts become maybe not just useful, but actually essential infrastructure for innovation in key Indian sectors? And could this model catch on even more widely, globally, wherever smaller innovators are facing these same kinds of IP struggles? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.